I, 19F, am a college student living in a dorm. My parents divorced when I was 6 after years of fighting and tension. My mom moved to another state for work, and my dad got primary custody since her new job involved lots of travel. Even though I lived with my dad, I stayed close to my mom through regular video calls and summer visits. My dad started dating my stepmom about a year after the divorce and married her when I was 8. My stepmom already had a daughter, Samantha, 29F, from her previous marriage. From the beginning, it was clear that my stepmom saw me as an outsider. She would constantly compare me to Samantha, pointing out how well-behaved and mature Samantha was compared to me. Nothing I did was ever good enough for her. Samantha was already 18 and in college when our parents got married, so we never really developed a sister relationship. She would come home on weekends sometimes, but she barely acknowledged my existence. The few times she did talk to me, it was to boss me around or complain about something I'd done wrong. I learned pretty quickly to stay out of her way. Growing up, I spent a lot of time in my room avoiding family gatherings because every time we were all together, my stepmom would find ways to put me down or make me feel unwelcome. She would make comments about how I wasn't as pretty as Samantha, or how I should try harder to be more like her real daughter. My dad never stood up for me. He would just change the subject or tell me to stop being so sensitive when I complained. 5 years ago, Samantha married Derek, 31 meters. I remember thinking at their wedding how happy and in love they seemed. They now have 2 kids, Mason who's 4 and Emma who's 2. I barely know my step-niece and step-nephew since I only see them at mandatory family gatherings like Christmas and Thanksgiving. Samantha never made any effort to include me in their lives. When I started college last fall, I chose to live in the dorms even though my dad and stepmom's house was just 20 minutes away. My dad offered to let me live at home to save money, but I knew living under the same roof as my stepmom would be terrible for my mental health. I needed space to be myself without constant criticism. Plus, the dorms weren't that expensive since I got a decent scholarship. Everything was going fine until about 3 months ago. I was studying for a test when someone started banging on my door. It was Samantha, looking frazzled with both kids in tow. She said she had an emergency meeting at work and her regular babysitter had canceled last minute. She begged me to watch the kids for just 2 hours, saying she would lose her job if she missed this meeting. I felt guilty saying no since they were family, even though we weren't close. The kids were actually pretty well behaved, and Samantha did come back within 2 hours like she promised. She even brought me coffee as a thank you. I thought it was a one-time thing. But then it started happening regularly. At first, it was once a week, then twice, then 3 times. Every time she had some work emergency that required me to watch the kids. The kids were still well behaved, but the timing started getting longer. 2 hours became 3, then 4. Sometimes she wouldn't answer her phone when I called to ask when she was coming back. I started making excuses when I could, saying I had class or study group meetings. But Samantha would cry and guilt-trip me, saying things like I thought we were family or the kids loved spending time with their aunt. She would remind me how she had helped me by bringing me coffee that first time. When guilt didn't work, she would get angry and tell me I was being selfish. I felt stuck. I didn't want to cause family drama by refusing, but watching 2 small kids while trying to keep up with college work was getting really hard. My grades were starting to slip because I couldn't focus on studying with 2 kids running around my small dorm room. My roommate was getting annoyed too, though she tried to be understanding. Last week was the final straw. I had an important group project meeting for my marketing class. It counted for 40% of our final grade, and my group had been planning this meeting for weeks. I told Samantha clearly in the morning that I absolutely could not watch the kids that evening. I even explained about the project and how important it was. She seemed to understand and said okay. But at 6 p.m., just as I was getting ready to leave for my project meeting, I heard a knock. I looked through the peephole and saw the kids standing there alone. Before I could even open the door, I heard car tires screeching. Samantha was already driving away. She had literally dropped her kids at my door and run. I was furious and panicked. I tried calling Samantha multiple times but her phone was switched off. I couldn't miss my project meeting, my group was counting on me and my grade depended on it. But I also couldn't leave a 4-year-old and 2-year-old alone in my dorm room. My roommate was at her boyfriend's place, and I didn't know any other babysitters. After trying Samantha for 30 minutes straight with no response, I finally called Derek. I had his number saved from a family barbecue last summer but had never actually called him before. When he answered, I explained that Samantha had dropped the kids at my dorm without my permission, and I couldn't watch them because I had an important meeting. Derek seemed really confused. He asked what I meant by drop the kids and how often this happened. I told him honestly that Samantha had been leaving the kids with me 2 to 3 times a week for the past 3 months for her work meetings. He got very quiet and said he would come pick up the kids. When Derek arrived 20 minutes later, he looked angry but didn't say anything to me. He just hugged the kids, thanked me quietly, and left. I managed to make it to my project meeting only 15 minutes late, and thankfully my group was understanding. I haven't heard from Samantha since then. My stepmom and dad aren't answering my calls either. I tried texting my dad to explain my side but got no response. I feel like maybe I shouldn't have called Derek, but what else could I have done? Samantha gave me no choice by leaving her kids and disappearing. Ida? Update when I didn't expect my post to blow up like it did. The past few days have been absolute chaos, and I'm still trying to process everything that's happened. The morning after I made my post, I was woken up at 6 a.m. by my phone ringing. It was my stepmom, and as soon as I answered, she started screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. She called me every horrible name imaginable: selfish, backstabbing, evil, homewrecker. She said I had single-handedly destroyed Samantha's life and ruined a perfect family. At first, I was too groggy to understand what she was talking about. Then she dropped the bomb. Derek had packed his bags the night before and taken the kids to stay at his parents' house. According to my stepmom, after picking up the kids from my dorm, Derek had gone straight to Samantha's office. The security guard told him she had already left for the day, at 3 p.m. When Derek called her supervisor, he found out something that confirmed his worst suspicions. Samantha hadn't had any late meetings or work emergencies in the past 3 months. In fact, she regularly left work early 2 to 3 times a week. All those times she was dumping her kids on me, claiming to have urgent work meetings. She was actually meeting some guy named James. Apparently, James worked at the coffee shop near her office, and they had been having an affair for months. My stepmom said Derek had been suspicious for a while because Samantha had started acting differently, always on her phone, working late, being secretive. But he had no concrete proof until I opened my big mouth. When Derek confronted Samantha with what he had learned, she broke down and confessed everything. She had been seeing James behind his back, using me as her unwitting alibi to cover her tracks. When Derek found out I had been babysitting without his knowledge, it gave him the proof he needed to confirm his suspicions. My stepmom was livid that I had betrayed Samantha by telling Derek about the babysitting. She said I should have kept my mouth shut and just watched the kids like a good sister would. When I tried to defend myself, saying I had no idea about the affair and was just overwhelmed with the constant babysitting, she called me a liar. She was convinced I must have known about James and deliberately told Derek to hurt Samantha. I was shocked. How was any of this my fault? I didn't ask Samantha to cheat. I didn't ask her to use me in my dorm as cover for her affair. I didn't even know James existed until my stepmom's angry call. I was just a college student trying to study and maintain my grades while being used as an unwitting accomplice in my stepsister's affair. But my stepmom wouldn't listen to reason. She kept going on about how family protects family, and I had violated that sacred trust. She said real sisters would have covered for each other no matter what. When I pointed out that Samantha and I were never close and she only started acting like my sister when she needed a babysitter, my stepmom completely lost it. She ended the call saying I was dead to her and she never wanted to see my face again. My roommate Sarah, who had heard the whole conversation because of my stepmom's screaming, hugged me while I cried. I couldn't believe I was being blamed for Samantha's choices. Sarah suggested I call my dad, thinking he might be more reasonable. That was a mistake. My dad called back a few hours later, and instead of defending me, he took their side. He said I needed to apologize to Samantha immediately. When I asked what I should apologize for, being used as an unknowing accomplice in her affair or having my studies disrupted by surprise babysitting, he said I was being immature and needed to grow up. According to my dad, sometimes marriages have problems and things happen. He said I had no right to judge Samantha's choices or get involved in her marriage. When I pointed out that I didn't get involved by choice, she involved me by using me to cover her affair. He said I was being dramatic. He actually suggested that I should call Derek and tell him I had made a mistake about how often Samantha left the kids with me. I hung up on him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own father wanted me to lie to help cover up Samantha's affair. The same man who spent years lecturing me about honesty and integrity was now telling me to lie to protect my cheating stepsister. A few of my friends from high school texted me saying they had heard what happened. Apparently Samantha had been posting vague, dramatic status updates on Facebook about betrayal and family loyalty. She hadn't named me directly, but everyone who knew our family could figure out what she was talking about. I tried calling Derek, not to lie like my dad suggested, but to apologize for unknowingly helping Samantha hide her affair. He didn't answer but texted back saying it wasn't my fault and he was grateful I had told him the truth. He said he had suspected something was wrong for months but couldn't prove anything until my call gave him the push to investigate further. At least someone understands I'm not the villain here. I'm still trying to process everything. My grades are suffering because I can't focus on studying when my phone keeps blowing up with angry messages from my stepmom's side of the family. They're all calling me a traitor and saying I destroyed Samantha's marriage. But I didn't destroy anything. Samantha destroyed her own marriage when she chose to cheat. She destroyed our already fragile stepsister relationship when she used me to cover her affair. And my stepmom and dad destroyed my trust in them by defending her actions and trying to make me the scapegoat. Update: 2 things have gotten so much worse, and I've discovered something that made me lose all respect for my stepmom. Remember how she blamed me entirely for exposing Samantha's affair? Well, it turns out she knew about it all along. Not only did she know, but she had been actively helping Samantha hide it from Derek. I found this out in the most unexpected way. Last night, I got a Facebook message from Rachel, Samantha's best friend since high school. Rachel and I had only met a few times at family gatherings, and she had always been cold towards me, just like Samantha. So I was surprised when she reached out. Rachel said she couldn't sleep at night knowing what they had done to me. She felt guilty for helping hide the affair and wanted to clear her conscience. According to her, my stepmom knew about James from the very beginning. She even encouraged the affair, telling Samantha she was too young to be tied down with 2 kids and deserved to have some fun. When Samantha started seeing James 6 months ago, her biggest problem was finding time to meet him without Derek finding out. She couldn't keep using work excuses because Derek and her supervisor were golf buddies, and she worried he might eventually ask about all her late meetings. That's when my stepmom came up with the perfect solution: me. Rachel said my stepmom was the one who suggested using me as their cover. She knew I lived alone in the dorm, was too young to question things too deeply, and would feel guilty refusing to help family. She told Samantha to play up the working mom angle, cry if necessary, and use my own guilt against me if I tried to say no. The worst part? Rachel said my stepmom and Samantha would laugh about it during their Sunday brunches. They would joke about how naive I was, believing all those fake work meeting excuses. My stepmom would brag about how she had raised me to be such a helpful stepsister, always willing to babysit at a moment's notice. They saw me as nothing but a convenient tool to facilitate Samantha's affair. Rachel shared screenshots of text conversations between her, Samantha, and my stepmom discussing their plan. There were messages about coordinating timing, making sure I was home before Samantha dropped off the kids, and deciding what excuses to use each time. They even had a group chat called Operation Freedom where they planned everything. Reading those messages made me physically sick. All those times my stepmom called me family and guilted me about sisterly duty, she was just manipulating me. She didn't see me as family at all. I was just a useful pawn in her scheme to help her real daughter cheat on her husband. It explained why my stepmom was so furious when I called Derek. I wasn't just exposing Samantha's affair, I was exposing her own role in it. She wasn't angry because I hurt Samantha, she was angry because I accidentally revealed her part in the deception. I also found out something else from the screenshots. The coffee shop where James worked? My stepmom was the one who introduced him to Samantha. He was the son of one of her book club friends, and she had deliberately orchestrated their meeting, knowing James was interested in Samantha. She had been playing matchmaker for her married daughter behind everyone's backs. I forwarded all of Rachel's messages and screenshots to Derek. He deserved to know the full truth about how my stepmom had helped orchestrate and cover up her daughter's affair. He replied almost immediately, thanking me again for being honest. He said he had already hired a lawyer and was filing for divorce. Given my stepmom's involvement in facilitating the affair, his lawyer felt confident they could get him full custody of the kids. I also sent the screenshots to my dad, asking if he knew about this too. Did he know his wife had helped plan and cover up his stepdaughter's affair? Did he know she had used me as their unwitting accomplice? He hasn't responded yet, but his silence speaks volumes. Either he knew and was complicit, or he was as much in the dark as I was. Neither option makes me feel better about him demanding I apologize to Samantha. Rachel asked me not to tell anyone she was the one who revealed everything. She said she still had to see my stepmom and Samantha at social events, and she couldn't handle the drama if they knew she had exposed them. I promised to keep her identity secret, but I told her she might want to rethink her friendship with people who could so callously use and manipulate others. I'm still trying to process all of this. Every time I think this situation can't get worse, some new betrayal comes to light. I thought finding out about Samantha's affair was bad enough. Finding out my own stepmom orchestrated the whole thing and deliberately used me to help hide it? That's a whole new level of betrayal I wasn't prepared for. Update 3: A lot has changed since my last update. The situation with my family has completely fallen apart, but honestly, I'm starting to feel relieved about being away from all their manipulation and lies. Derek filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. During the preliminary hearing, his lawyer presented all the evidence about Samantha's affair, including the screenshots Rachel sent me showing my stepmom's involvement in planning and covering it up. The judge was particularly disturbed by how they had used a teenage college student to facilitate the affair without my knowledge. She called it morally reprehensible that they endangered their own children by leaving them with me against my will just so Samantha could meet her affair partner. The judge granted Derek temporary full custody of the kids, with Samantha only getting supervised visitation twice a week. My stepmom isn't allowed to supervise these visits because of her role in the affair. I heard from my old neighbor that Samantha moved back in with my dad and stepmom after Derek kicked her out of their house. Last week, my stepmom tried reaching out to me. She left a long voicemail crying about how sorry she was and how she only helped Samantha because she was her daughter. She said she never meant to hurt me and didn't think about how using me to cover the affair would affect me. She begged me to talk to Derek and tell him Samantha was a good mother who deserved another chance. I blocked her number without responding. Her apology wasn't about feeling bad for using me, it was just another attempt to manipulate me into helping Samantha. Even now, she's still trying to use me for her schemes. My dad finally broke his silence after 3 weeks of ignoring my messages. He claims he never knew about the affair or my stepmom's involvement in it. But instead of being angry at them for lying to him and using me, he's still pushing me to help fix things. He said I should forgive them because they're both suffering enough already and family needs to stick together in hard times. I told him they stopped being my family the moment they decided to use me as a pawn in their games. He got angry and said I was being vindictive and cruel. That's when I realized he hadn't changed at all, he was still choosing them over me, just like he always had. I moved out of the dorms and am now sharing an apartment with my friend Sarah off campus. I couldn't risk Samantha showing up with her kids again, and the constant stress was affecting my studies. Sarah has been incredibly supportive through all of this, and living with her has helped me feel safe and calm for the first time in months. I've blocked my stepmom, Samantha, my dad, and everyone from that side of the family on all social media and my phone. The only family member I still talk to is my mom. When I told her everything that happened, she offered to let me transfer to a college near her in California. But I decided to stay. I won't let them drive me away from my school and friends. Derek sends me pictures of Mason and Emma sometimes. The kids are doing well with him. He started therapy to deal with the betrayal and is focusing on being a good single dad. He hired a proper nanny to help with childcare, which is what Samantha should have done instead of dumping them on me. As for me, I'm focusing on my studies and my mental health. My grades are improving now that I don't have surprise babysitting duties disrupting my study time. Some of my dad's relatives have been posting on Facebook about how I destroyed a happy family, but I know the truth. Samantha and my stepmom destroyed their own family with their lies and manipulation. I just refuse to keep being their victim. I've learned that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away from toxic family members who only see you as a tool to use for their own benefit. Blood relation doesn't give anyone the right to manipulate and use you. I'm done feeling guilty for exposing their lies. They made their choices, and now they can live with the consequences.